Everyone says hi. Everyone says hi. Everyone says don't stay in a sad place where they don't care how you are. Everyone says hi. If the money's housing, you can always come home. We can do the old things. We can do all the bad things. If the food gets you leery, you can always phone. We could do all the good things. We could do it, we could do it, we could do it. Don't stay in a bad place where they don't care how you are. Everyone says hi. Everyone says hi. Everyone says hi. And the girl next door, and the guy upstairs. Everyone says hi. And your mom and dad. Everyone says hi. And your big fat dog. Everyone says hi. Everyone I hope that I'm crazy. I feel you driving and you're on the wheel. Slow down, let someone love you. I've never touched you since I started to feel. If there's nothing to hide me, and you never seen me having naked and wide. Somebody lied. I say it's hard to be alive. Now your smile is spreading thin. Seems you're trying not to lose. Since I'm not supposed to be, all you've got to do is win. That's all you gotta do. Fresh on your pages, secret thinkers sometimes you swing around. Life lies down on its heroes, where your wound was on to make someone proud. Someone like you should not be allowed to start any fires. Now your smile is spreading thin. Seems you're trying not to lose. Seems I'm not supposed to be. All you've got to swing. That's all you gotta do. It ain't over. Now your smile is spreading thin. Seems you're trying to lose. Since I'm not supposed to win, all you've got to do is win. That's all you gotta do. To do this win. It ain't over. When your smile is spreading. Sick and the living you. Seems you're trying not to lose. It ain't over. Since I'm not supposed to grin. That's all you gotta do. All you've got to do is win. It ain't over. No. Sick and the living you. All you've got to do is win. It ain't over. No, no. All you've got is all you've got. It ain't over. It ain't over.
All right, we're going to get going here pretty quick, y'all, so y'all can find a seat. All right. I've got just a couple minutes past 4, and I want to make sure we have all the time we have for this last speaker. Gosh, I don't know about all of you, but I'm kind of sad to see day 2 come to an end, but what an amazing way to finish it out. I mean, we started the day with Lieutenant Governor Toland. We're finishing the day out about as strong as we can get as well. So this is going to be a fun one for a lot of different reasons that we'll get to here in a second. But welcome to the 4 p.m. session, Disrupting Big and Small. Wichita Startup Week is powered by Koch Industries, and now is the time to realize and celebrate all of our entrepreneurial opportunities. I feel like I have to keep on saying this to remind myself, but this is a volunteer-led effort. Everything that you're seeing here is 100% volunteer-led, in partnership, however, with Techstars, a worldwide network to help entrepreneurs succeed. Before we get started, I want to recognize a few of our key sponsors. Obviously, Koch Industries is our presenting sponsor, EY for our hackathon, Cox Business for sponsoring our pitch competition, Fidelity Bank and Martin Pringle for our track presentations, our tracks as well. This session, however, is presented by Martin Pringle. They're a local regional law firm with offices here in Kansas City, and they have more than 40 attorneys with expertise. Before I get into all the introductions, you may have remembered that we had a little contest, right? We said, like, click, share for your chance to win a MacBook Air. That session closed as of this morning, and the winner is actually in this room right now, and they do not even know it. So we didn't plan it this way, but she is in the room. And everybody, please put your hands together for Amy Huscher. Come on up. Yeah, you. Come here. Let's go. This is yours. Yeah. So, you want to take a photo? Okay, that's right. Surprise, surprise. I was like, we need photos for social media. Uh, so, Amy, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a quick photo. It's all yours. Yes. Obviously, we can do that with our incredible sponsors, so thanks to all of them. As fun as it was to give away a MacBook Air, this next session is going to be even better. So now I'm going to introduce our speakers. Jake Wayman is going to be our moderator. Jake's a firm believer in creating value through leadership and relationships and positive proactive change. He brings innovation to the forefront because delivering value depends on disruption. You know him now as Orange Theory Fitness, but his other ventures include Startup Grind, Shift, ICT, and E2E. Just a real quick plug for Jake. You know, when we were first starting this thing, I said, gosh, who do we call? And they said, the first person you need to talk to is Jake Wayman. He was on our committee. He was our volunteer fundraiser, and this event looks like it does because he was able to bring in a lot of great supporters. So big round of a hand for Jake. Yeah, he didn't know he was going to do that, but it is well deserved. Equally impressive is Jason Illian, and we're so glad that he's here. And he's the managing director of Koch Disruptive Technologies. He serves on the board of DQIQ, Alkira, advisor for 8VC, Rise of the Rest, and Trust Ventures. He's a published author and nationally renowned speaker. He graduated magna cum laude from TCU with a BBA in international finance. Help me welcome Jason and Jake.
Did these things not work? Oh, they do work. Oh, it's on me. Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Come on. Afternoon. There we go. There we go. Well, I'll have to be honest. I was actually invited here about an hour ago to come moderate you. So hopefully we can get through this and everybody can get some knowledge from you.
I thought the MacBook Air was for us.
I did too.
Not so much.
What did we get? MacBook Airs? Oh, coffee. Okay, coffee. Awesome. Well, today the conversation they talked about for the subject was disrupting big and small. So most of you know you as Jason from KDT from what they've seen in the advertising for this event. But tell them a little bit about who is Jason. You know, how did you end up here in Wichita? What's your background? 5-10 minutes, maybe shorter than that. Just say like, hey, this is who Jason is.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. The interesting thing about big and small is actually I started very small. So I started as an entrepreneur. So my background, even though I studied international finance, for 20 years, I was a software entrepreneur in Dallas, Texas. And I built and sold 2 startups. Neither one of them were home runs. And I have every scar to prove that. But, it's been a complete journey for me from one side, starting a company, raising funds everywhere from angel funds to VCs to hedge funds. I think I've spoken to about anybody that has money and would give me money. I've spoken to them at least once, and probably twice because I didn't pitch them well the first time. And build companies and sold them. And then about 4 years ago, moving up here on the request of Chase Koch, who runs KDT, to help him build out the growth and venture arm called Koch Disruptive Technologies. But my background, really my heart for getting into this was in the late 90s when I was graduating from college at TCU. Some of my friends were first wave entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. So one of them was the first non-founding member of Napster. One of them built this thing that they called social networking. It was called Friendster. And it was the first social networking site that used to crash all the time because it was on centralized servers before our cloud. And so as I'm watching this, and at the time I'm studying high finance with strong capital management, I'm watching the internet come to life. And so if any of you are as old as me, which most of you fortunately are younger, but the internet used to just be flat. You went there for information. That was it. You didn't transact. You didn't buy anything. There was a day when people were like, who would put their credit card on this thing, right? That was like crazy that you'd buy something from Amazon. But I started watching the internet all of a sudden become relational and transactional. And I said, wow, what's going to happen when all of a sudden we can connect with each other over the internet and we can buy and sell goods over the internet and services? And I just became intrigued. And that was my first foray into saying, I think I'm an entrepreneur. and really leaving a job in finance to move back to Dallas. And one of my friends in Dallas at the time had started a company called Handango. And most people probably don't know about it, but it was the first app store for phones. It was the app store for Nokia phones. Nokia had the market before Apple ever got there. They just didn't believe in it, right? They didn't believe in this innovation and disruption. But they'd started a company in Dallas called Handango. And it really, what he found out, it was just a friend of mine who was kind of a financier in a hedge fund. And he was trying to find something to invest in. And he realized, hey, these phones, you could put apps on these. And so he started aggregating all these app developers and putting them in his Nokia app store. And I remember the first time I could pull up like a spreadsheet on my phone, I was like, woo, like, look at this. Not even beginning to see where this could go, right? And so that was my first step into really starting and being part of the ecosystem. At about that same time, one of my friends was starting a company called GodTube, and it was a Christian video site, early 2000s. So remember, YouTube was still really early on. And he's like, I want to create this Christian video site. You want to be involved? And my answer was like, no, not really. I'm doing other stuff, but I'm happy to help you because I believe in your cause. And so one of the things I learned is, as entrepreneurs, we help each other, right? You've given a lot back to Wichita and helped. I know Jason Taves has done that. A number of other people have. And I was just trying to do the same thing in Dallas, just by helping him. And I made a few introductions. One of my friends put the first couple $1 million in the company, and he goes, well, if I do this, you have to be part of the company as well. And I'm like, I don't want to be part of the company. Well, so I sign on. I'm like, I'm happy to help. We go from about 20,000 users to 2 million users in like a month. And this was before social networking. So if any of you remember, you just had to get you plugged in your email distribution list, right? You took your email address book and you could just blast everybody in your email account, right? And so we plugged this into our videos. And so you could just blast everybody on your email. And we had just a couple videos just take off and go completely viral. And so we went from 20,000 users to 2 million. We're the fastest growing website in the world for like a month and a half. And I didn't know what I was doing, right? But it was growing really fast. And a hedge fund came on and said, well, we would want to fund you guys with some more money. And I was like, well, I'm just the chief, strategy officer. Talked to the CEO, and they did. And they basically came back and said, we're going to fund you, but you have to become the CEO. And I'm like, listen, guys, I didn't even want to be here. Stop this, right? But I ended up being the CEO. And what happens is we continue to grow the site, and we get caught in 2008, right? And our money came in two chunks. It came in, or two tranches. So I think it was $30 million at the time. I think we had 15 million and 15 million. And our board had told us to the 15 million, just spend. And we were spending. And then 2008 hit, and everybody said, no more money. And we had like $1.5 million left of the 15, and they weren't going to give us the second 15. And that's the first time I learned how to fire 100 friends overnight. And so literally one day I walked into a room with 200 and some people in it. And I said, if I call your name, go to this room. If I call their name, go to that room. And I called out 100 of my friends that went to a room, and I had to let them all go. And then I went back to my office and I cried. And I realized how hard this really is, right, to build a really good company. Now, the company ended up making it. It ended up selling to Salem Communication for a fraction of what it could have sold for, right? Had we survived this better, but we sold it. Then I started another company, a B2B ebook company called Bookshot. And this was early when Kindle had ebooks. And it actually had started as a social reading platform. So the concept is we could all read a book together and see each other's notes and concepts and everything else inside the book. And frankly, I couldn't make it work. Like, it comes to be that none of y'all want to share your notes with anybody else, right? And so as we're doing all this, what we learned, though, was that companies, we built all the technology, we'd gone out to all the publishers and licensed all their content. And what I found out is that companies wanted to buy books, digital books in bulk. They wanted to buy like 5,000 books at a time. Come to find out, Apple and Amazon and nobody else could do it. And we had the perfect engine for it. And so what happens is we could start selling 5,000 books at a time. And there's a unique publishing. If you guys remember, like 5 or 10 years ago, Amazon and Apple getting in trouble for collusion around books because they set prices with the publishers that you couldn't break. But what I found is the loophole was if you sold them in bulk, you could do your own pricing. And so we found out a way to change the game and not fight against Amazon. So we grew the company, sold it to a private equity group in 2017. I stayed on as an executive in residence for about a year. And my friend said, you're going to like it for about a year, and then you're not going to like the private equity world. And they were right. And nothing against private equity. It's just that they believe in, trying to just keep the capital as it is and minimize spending. And I'm a startup guy. I'm an innovation and disruption guy. And so I left, and it was the first time in my life that I'd actually had more than like 2 weeks off, because when you're running a company, you don't take time off, right? Ever. Even on vacation, you answer emails. And so my wife says, why don't you just take some time off to think and pray about where God would have us next? And so I was living in North Dallas, and my wife is from Wichita, Kansas. And so I said, well, hey, why don't we just go to Wichita and spend some time with your family? We don't get a lot of chance to do that. Started making some trips back and forth. And 10 years earlier, I'd made friends with some of the Coke executives and didn't even know what half of them did. We were just friends because we had mutual friends. And one of them asked me to come in and kind of tell a story about what do startups do and what are you doing in technology and what does the ecosystem look like? And I started doing that as just another way to give back, not knowing that there was anything there and actually not even looking for it. Because my wife had always said, if you ever think about moving to Wichita? And I always said, what am I going to do in Wichita? Right? Like, I'm a technologist. And little did I know that Coke had a vision for starting a growth and venture arm, specifically focusing on investing in the next generation entrepreneurs, because that's how Coke got started, was being entrepreneurial. And so I got a chance to come up, and Chase had a big vision for this. And I just play a really small piece in that vision of helping Coke go out there and deploy capital in anything from early stage to late stage startups across multiple themes.
Well, kind of in that vein, going into with Coke Disruptive Technologies, tell us a little about KDT and how it works as an investment unit of Coke Industries.
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with venture capital in general, so just a little bit of background. Coke is both kind of the venture and the growth arm, and because we are not a typical VC where we're taking outside money, it's just our money, we have a lot more flexibility. So we can write checks as small as, let's say, $5 to $10 million a check, and on the high side, we can write $500 million or more per check. And it's not a fund, so we don't have a 7-year or 10-year cycle or something like a typical fund was. So if you take money from a VC, know that they want their money back, typically within their fund cycle, right? Because they already need to deploy that back to their LPs to let them know how great they are so they can raise another fund, right? So we don't have that because it's our money. And so we've structured this in such a way that we not only want to go out there and invest across many different themes and verticals, but we want to also have flexibility on the size of the check. And so we typically invest domestically here in the US and in Israel. So we have an Israeli office in Tel Aviv. And we have now, I think roughly, don't quote me exactly, I want to say roughly 35 investments and about $1.6 billion that we've invested in the last kind of 3.5 years. And they do range. We have some small investments that have been a few $1 million, and we have some, obviously, that are hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the only reason we can get to a number that big. But the real heart of this has been, and this is what resonated with me to come up here and be part of this, was just Chase's vision to say, how do we empower the next generation of entrepreneurs to go out there and transform society? And do that in such a way that they're empowering other people, whether that's with, a mobile startup, with a blockchain startup, with an IoT startup, what is it? And we certainly can't do everything, but each of the managing directors focus on different areas. So we have somebody that focuses on kind of industry 4.0, somebody else on life sciences. I spend most of my time in software. So anything from blockchain and crypto to AI, big data, cloud, enterprise software, that's where I spend the majority of my time. And honestly, I just spend most of my days talking to people smarter than myself, trying to ask somewhat intelligent questions about what the heck are you doing? And why is it transformative? And how can we help you? And I think that the piece that we try to bring as Coke Industries is beyond the capital is how do we help?
Well, so you have 35 investments roughly within KDT, and they're in a wide swath of industries. I mean, when I see them all come out on the Business Journal or the press releases, there's many of them. So how do you go about finding these disruptive companies and also the founders that are within them? Are there certain qualities or attributes you look for not only in the company, but also in the founders?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what exactly are we investing in, people and companies, right? So we kind of look at the world through our mental model is to have a couple different lenses that we look through. So one of them is we look for disruptive platforms. So I'm not looking for something that's incrementally better. I'm looking for something that's 10 times better, 5 times better, 50 times better, because I'm trying to literally shatter the status quo. So I'll tell you, the first time I sat in a room about like this, and somebody got on stage and goes, let me tell you about this company we're building. There's going to come a day when you pull out your phone and you can have somebody come pick you up in their car and they'll drive you somewhere and drop you off. And the VCs in the room are like, that's crazy. What madman's going to get in somebody else's car, right? It's called Uber and Lyft. And that pitch was for Uber Cab. That's what they called it, right? I remember hearing another pitch of these guys coming up here and goes, what if I could rent my couch out and you could come stay at my couch? And like, who's staying at your house? Like these madmen, right? Now Airbnb is bigger than the whole hotel industry put together, shattering the status quo. Now, here's the thing is the greatest ideas aren't obvious. That's why they're so great. If they were obvious, everybody nods their heads, oh yeah, that's going to work. Mm-hmm. Anytime I get in a room where everybody's doing this, I'm like, no. If we're all nodding, that's not going to work. I need to be in a room where some people are like, that dude's crazy. I'm not even going to let him wash my dog, right? Then I'm like, ooh, okay, what's he doing, right? And that was actually what happened when blockchain and crypto first started taking off as well. I remember when the Satoshi white paper came out and we were reading over this with one of my friends, and he's like, man, there's something behind this. And he called it just the protocol layer at the time, but it's what we call blockchain today. He's like, if this really works, this is a game changer. But I remember when they first came out, they're like, these guys are goofing around. There's no way that there's another layer of money or transaction. But it was one of those things that you had certain people going, and everybody else going, no way, right? So that's what we look for. I mean, we look for the disruptive. Second piece we look for there is high potential. Can this truly be something that's going to be a significant platform? What I would tell you when you're pitching your startup is just know your audience. Meaning there are certain VCs, because if they have a smaller fund, they don't need it to be a $1 billion platform. They just need it to be a few $100 million platform. Koch Industries is not one of those, right? We have billions of dollars to deploy, so we need to be a really big platform. If it's not that, it's hard for us to get behind because it just simply does not move the needle for Koch. That doesn't mean we don't introduce people to other investors, but there's great ideas that I can't get into yet, just simply because it doesn't move. It's not a big enough potential for us. The third piece is entrepreneurs, principled entrepreneurs, right? I want to talk to somebody who has a reason for wanting to take our money. Like, they're not just taking money no matter what. They're just like, just give me the money, whatever it takes, I'm going to do that. Like, I need you to be thoughtful. Like, why are you doing this? Like, how is it going to be transformative? They have principles that they're willing to stand on, and they're willing to say no if something falls outside of those principles, right? And then the last one is just mutual benefit, meaning what can we bring to the entrepreneur besides the capital to help them? And what is the entrepreneur bringing to us besides financial success that will help us as well, right? It needs to be a two-way street. So we want to help, and we've built something called Koch Labs that we can talk more about too, about just being able to help the entrepreneur far beyond the capital. And then also that entrepreneur, meaning how else do you plug into the Koch ecosystem or in the larger national entrepreneur ecosystem that's going to help? Because if it's just about you, I'm not that interested. But if it's about a high tide raising all ships, I'm really interested.
Well, elaborate more on Koch Labs. I mean, I've seen it talked about in the local business journal elsewhere, but I've never really got a full understanding of what exactly is Koch Labs.
Yeah, so the name sometimes can be a little misleading because people are like, Koch Labs, hey, take me to that place. And it's not really a place. It's like it's a framework or a mental model of thinking about how do we help companies. So there's a lot of places out there that have capital right now. So how do we as investors differentiate ourselves? So what we've done is we've built an entire team that sits inside of KDT called Koch Labs, and their job is to help the entrepreneurs beyond the capital. So whether that means bringing relationships, subject matter experts, somebody inside of the 150,000 people of Koch Industries to the table to help them, or to help with other of our relationships. So if we have relationships with Walmart or Amazon or whoever else, how do we bring those relationships to the table to help that startup? That's Koch Labs. And the people that work on that job, their sole job is to work alongside that entrepreneur to help them. And as an entrepreneur, what I found early on is I had some investors that were no help at all besides the money. Like, they showed up quarterly, they asked how the company was doing, they disappeared to the next quarter. But if you can have somebody there that will open doors for you, be a sounding board for you, as a young company, sometimes it takes 9 months, a year, 2 years to open a door, that if somebody else can pick up the phone and make a call, that's invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're trying to do with Coke Labs. And I think in most instances, it is our differentiator. It's why when we're sitting out there with a great entrepreneur, whether they're in Denver or Miami or Silicon Valley or Cincinnati or Wichita, right? They would want to choose us over somebody else, is to say, well, you guys are going to really help me, right? And the answer is yes. And honestly, this was Chase's brainchild. And it was also the thing that I was most worried about building, because getting corporate people to move quickly and to have aligned incentives and to help is really, really hard, right? We're still not great at this. We suck less than we did before, right? That's our goal. Don't suck, just suck less, right? And I full credit to the team that runs Coke Labs. It is light years beyond where I thought we would be at this standpoint, being able to work with our different companies and our companies sharing ideas. And that's just really hard in a company of 100 people or 1,000. It gets exponentially more difficult in 100,000 people. But I give a lot of credit to senior management and to people like Chase, who've built this structure that says, you have to do this. This is part of your job, is to help other people inside the company. And so we do. And I've gotten 2 emails in the last 24 hours, separate Coke companies asking us to help them think through blockchain or cloud distribution or something else, and we'll go help them. And likewise, when we have a call saying, hey, we have a chemical question, or we're having this, they'll bring subject matter experts to help us. And all of this comes out to help the entrepreneurs. And to me, it's really the feather in our cap.
Well, kind of talking on Coke Labs, I feel like this room is like Wichita Labs, and it's the ecosystem. And you've had the opportunity to engage in several ecosystems through your time down in Dallas, but also through your investments that you've been doing, nationwide and worldwide. In your opinion, what can you do to encourage our ecosystem here in Wichita to, be vibrant, make the moves that we need to make for us to be successful for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Yeah. When we were in Dallas, I think when I was in Dallas 10 or 15 years ago, it's kind of like where Wichita is today. And we had help from a couple other people that went out of their way to help. So early on, Brad Feld of Techstars and Steve Case advised of the rest, before they were known for what they do today, they literally took calls from me, right? Steve, I flew up to DC at the time when he just started Revolutionist Fund, and he took time to spend time with me and introduced me to people. And I got to know Brad Feld. And Brad opened my eyes to what he built in Boulder, Colorado, right? If you guys remember Boulder, it was just kind of a sleepy university town. It wasn't a tech hub. You go there today, go downtown, you cannot throw a stone without hitting a tech company. And everybody there is supporting one another. It's all walking distance. They've created this great tech ecosystem. But it was only an overnight success because it took 25 years to build, right? It took time. And by the way, the same thing happened in Silicon Valley. Everybody looks at it today and says, well, it's Silicon Valley. That started in the 1940s, right? It started with semiconductor chips and defense. And then it changed to, computers. Then it went to the internet. Like, you can watch the waves happen and roll. And what just happened with the pandemic was I think, great for the national ecosystem, because a lot of people woke up and said, I don't want to live in the Bay Area anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. It's costing too much. I can't put my kids in school. And by the way, who's running the state anyways, right? And so people started spreading out. And the VCs, for the first time in my whole lives, they all stood up and said, well, do we need to live here? And so Steve Case, 4 or 5 years ago, when he started Rise of the Rest, said, well, this is going to happen everywhere. And that pandemic literally jumped us 5 or 10 years into the future. And so now there's people all over the place. And I'm shocked and surprised of, like, when I hear something great happening in Des Moines, right? Or Omaha, or Charlotte, or places that I'd never even heard of a tech ecosystem before. Somebody went and was successful, and they came back and they said, well, we're going to deploy the capital here. And I think that's the kind of thing that has to happen in Wichita. One is this kind of thing. You've got to gather. You've got to come together, not just virtually, but you've got to physically come together and spend time and share resources, time, insights, pushback. All of that stuff helps. And then we need somebody in here to be really successful, right? We need a couple big wins. Chicago took off because the Groupon mafia. Groupon went out there, was hugely successful, and all those guys took money and deployed it all over Chicago. And now there's all sorts of tech companies popping up all over Chicago, and they're supported by the family offices and things like that. And so what we have to do the same thing here. And listen, Wichita has a lot of the infrastructure. It's been known for being entrepreneurial before. We just got to take that leap forward with the technology, with the young entrepreneurs, and partner up with some of the old entrepreneurs that have more capital and say, hey, you've got to give back. You got to get back to this ecosystem. It's okay that you invest somewhere else too, but make sure you invest here as well.
So I got the 5-minute sign for questions that are going to come up. So kind of want to transition back into Coke. And, big businesses have a lot of trouble disrupting and handling disruption. So what advice, or even what's happened within Coke, as you've kind of mentioned with Coke Labs, and even your own experience going from a startup into a very large corporation, what recommendations do you have for larger companies and leaders within them to how to disrupt and how to handle disruption amongst in the organization and encourage disruption?
Yeah, so at Coke, the language we use is actually creative destruction. How do we creatively destroy ourselves, right? So the visual I always give is pull the gun out and you have an option. You can either shoot yourself in the foot and limp, or you can hand it to the market and let it shoot you in the chest. I'd rather limp, right? Because if you do not change, the market will kill you. Perfect example. One of my friends was approached by a gentleman by the name of Jeff, and Jeff was building this company and said, hey, I want to give you all the distribution rights for my books. And he's like, I can't take them because I have this big client called Barnes & Noble. And that was Jeff Bezos trying to give him all the distribution rights for Amazon. He didn't take it because he was backing Barnes & Noble. Ouch, bad day, really bad day, right? Because he was not willing to think Barnes & Noble was simply not willing to disrupt itself, right? Barnes & Noble had a huge head start. So did Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $50 million, and they laughed him out of the room, right? What happened to Sears, right? Like, we can go down the list, guys, but these are all big companies that could not get out of their own way and disrupt themselves. So what we at Coke try to do, and I say try because we don't do it anywhere near perfectly, is we try to creatively disrupt ourselves, meaning we're going to have some businesses that are in headwinds businesses, and we want to continue to optimize and grow those the best that we can. We want to get other businesses and tailwind businesses where we can continue to grow those because they're going to have exponential returns and become the future of Coke Industries. And at Coke, we have a little more flexibility than some companies because we're privately held. And I think as a private company, you can do something crazy and the market doesn't punish you because you're private, right? The stock price doesn't move because you don't have a stock price. A big company does that and they go out there, like we just invested in a quantum computing company, right? Somebody else does that and they're like, what are those crazy idiots doing over there? For us, we're like, it's okay, it's our money. We can do what we want to do with our money, right? And so it gives us that opportunity to kind of creatively disrupt ourselves and be okay if you get things wrong, because you're going to get stuff wrong, right? If you don't make mistakes, you're not going hard enough. And that's actually one of the hardest things to learn at Coke, because Coke is known for, they've seen a lot of success. So they have not seen a lot of like, well, that failed and we just lost 10 million. Okay, keep moving. Everybody's like, we lost money. Everybody stop and let's examine this. I'm like, no, let's keep moving. Like, we don't have time to stop. Like, yeah, quick examination so that we don't do it again, but we don't want to harbor this. We don't have time for that. We got to go build stuff, guys. And that's what we're still learning to do, is still learn to like, are we making enough mistakes to go after the big wins? Because guess what? One big win and you build a $5 or $10 billion company, you can be wrong 50 other times because you've built it once. And we're still learning how to do that well. So once again, suck less. Suck less.
Tagline. We're all going to get that tattooed on us. Suck less. Well, I think we're going to open up for some questions. We got a little bit of time. So who is going to be going around with the mic?
You have both mics. So
Oh, we have both mics.
you'll raise hands, call them out, and then please repeat it.
Okay, we can do that. All right. Robert Feeney.
Hey, Jason. Hi, Jason. Hey. Robert Feeney. And I'll do it without a mic until one shows up. So I have a question, and some of the folks in the room, it'll sound redundant, because earlier today I was talking about this when Lieutenant Governor was here, about the infrastructure that we see in Wichita is missing, that you would see, let's say, out on the coast, like on Silicon Valley, around incubators, accelerators, I'm calling that infrastructure for the sake of this conversation. Like that there is something that entrepreneurs can gravitate to that has a structure to it, even kind of like an assembly line in a way that gets those ideas out into the market, right? And they get coached out there. Is KDT doing that?
It's a good question. So the question is, what are we doing to help build the infrastructure, specifically in Wichita? That's the question, or just in general?
Specifically to Wichita.
Yeah. So what I would tell you is, whether it's KDT or any other company, or just your thought, or just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you want to lean into government entities and stuff, but don't rely on them, right? It's really a business structure to go do these types of things. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are building companies, right? We're the ones generating capital. We're the ones developing change. And so if you want to have those things happen, I've seen it happen the best when private companies come together and dedicate resources to go do this. Dallas went through the same thing, is actually still going through it. It's called the Dallas Entrepreneurial Center. It started probably 10 years ago by a friend of mine who became kind of like the first incubator, co-working space, place for people to get together. And it's still not become the Austin yet, right? Austin leapfrogged all of it, and Dallas is still trying to catch up. So the answer is like, yeah, you need all of that. You need it around, public companies, private companies that are doing this. You need it around universities. Wichita State has to be doing more of that stuff. You even need it around what I would say is elementary and other schools that are, building up entrepreneurs for the next generation, right? We're still educating our kids like they're all going to go work in paper mills. Right? Like that doesn't make any sense at all. So what's Coke doing? Coke is doing some things here, but we're not doing as much as we could yet, right? And that's because as we started building KDT, we had to say, what is our core? And our first core was like, we've got to go make investments in companies. And we're now getting to this place of like, where do you do more investments? Like we sponsored this, right? That's one thing that we're doing. Could we do more? Absolutely, we could do more. But we could do more here, but we could also do more in Houston and Nashville and other places where we also have Coke offices, right? So it's part of Coke's heart to give back. And I think people sometimes forget that Coke industry actually gives hundreds of millions of dollars every year all over the world to help build ecosystems. And we're learning how to do that better. We're not great at it yet, but we understand is not only do we want to give back, but we also want to give back with partners. And so another ecosystem, if you've never seen it, that's worth going to take a look is go to Bentonville sometime. Go to Northwest Arkansas. That used to be just Walmart land, right? You just go there if you're Walmart. You go there now because it's cool, right? Like they're moving tech companies in there. The Walton brothers just put on 140 miles of mountain bike track. So you can ride your mountain bikes anywhere in there. There's, young startups and tech companies. The University of Arkansas is getting into it. It just feels vibrant. And you walk around and you're like, this is pretty cool. And what's happening is once one person thinks that, then two people think it, and then four, and then eight, and that continues to grow. And I think Wichita has that same opportunity, right? They've just got a head start on us, and we have to figure out what's our mountain biking track, right? Like, what are we going to be known for? And we were talking about this beforehand is, we used to be known as the city of flight, right? What if we became the future of flight? What if all the autonomous vehicles and the software was all developed in Wichita, right? What if we built out Wichita with like 4 lanes every direction. Have you been on our roads? There's like 4 lanes. Like there's going to be 9,000 cars. There's like 2. This is the perfect place to do autonomy. Like we should be testing every autonomous vehicle in Wichita, Kansas. Why? Because it can't hit anything at first. Right? And then it gets cold enough that we can actually test it in the snow. Right? And so we're not all the way south that you don't get any of the weather, but we're not all the way north so they don't have to go through 12 feet of snow. Like we're in the perfect area. So we've got to think about what is good for us and not try to be something. We're not going to be Boulder. We're not going to be Austin. We don't want to be them. We want to be us. And then go figure out what key players can help us, Coke being one of them, but what other key players can help us go do that. And once we figure that out, then it becomes this thriving ecosystem that everybody's getting to play in, whether it's hardware, software, IoT, cloud, whatever that is.
Questions?
I'm curious, you work with tech, with everything that's come out about Facebook and then with them going down yesterday, do you think that our government will ever catch up and start putting restrictions on tech companies? Or are they just too far behind to even come close to creating a law?
So the question is, will our government ever catch up? Have anybody here met our government? And that's not a political comment. That is, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. We cannot count on our government to do this kind of stuff. They're behind, and by the time they catch up, we'll be 12 more steps ahead of them again. Will they, over time, start to put boundaries on some of the FANG companies? Yes, they will. I don't personally know everything that's happened behind the scenes with Facebook and stuff, but my guess is that some of that's not very good. Where there's smoke, there's sometimes fire. And what I would tell you about Facebook or any company, and this is where I think about investing in principled entrepreneurs, is before you just go build something, you need to ask why. What exactly are we doing and what outcome will we have? Because if you have an outcome where people are addicted to their phones and they're worried about their body image and they don't feel like they can go to school and there's no boundaries on that, have you really benefited society, even if you've made a $200 billion company? And I think it's our responsibility as entrepreneurs to ask ourselves that question. And, the great thing about entrepreneurs is they'll adapt, right? Like, that's the beautiful thing about blockchain and the new generation technologies. There will be a distributed social network in the future that isn't owned by any one person. It's owned by the community, right? There will be anything that you see as centralized today, like the banking system. Really? I mean, how helpful is the bank to you guys most days, right? It's just not that helpful, right? I can store my assets anywhere. I don't need to go drive up and just pull them out when I have everything else in my life on my phone, right? So these things, these centralized structures have to change. There will be government regulation. And by the way, I appreciate government regulation when it's trying to protect the people. It's always just a tension to know what's overreaching and stopping innovation versus what's really protecting the people. And if you don't know what it is, like if the government or some regulatory body can't describe what it is, then it's going to be overreach every time because they just don't know what they're doing. But if we can partner with them enough to help them educate and give consumer protection, then I'm all for that, right? I want people that aren't as educated on technologies to be educated on them. But the great thing about entrepreneurs, they adapt. It doesn't matter what the rules is, just tell us the rules and we'll change. Right? We'll iterate quickly. We'll come up with new ideas. We'll build new companies. And that's what your company is going to have to do, right? Whatever you're doing right now is be prepared to change. No company that I've ever been part of that I've helped build, and very, very rarely ones that I've actually invested in, they've all gone through some type of metamorphosis where they thought they were doing X and they became Y, and that's where they became successful. Everybody's like, they were always awesome at Y. I'm like, they didn't even know what Y was when they started, right? They started over here. But that's part of that adaptation and growing process, not just for your company, but for you, right? And that's why you need to put good mentors around you to help you see your blind spots and help you adapt and change as you grow.
Time for about 2 more questions. Trevor.
So you work with one of the most transformative, revolutionary entrepreneurs of all time. I was just curious if you had like a favorite advice or something you want to share that Charles has shared with you.
Well, so just for the record, Charles doesn't usually seek me out to share directly with me, although I've heard many great things. So I've had a couple unique experiences with Charles. So the first one I'll tell you that I thought just blew my mind was when the pandemic first hit. Most companies and VCs were pulling people in and saying, stop the spending, right? If you guys first remember, we didn't know how long we were going to be shut down. We didn't know what was going to happen to our economy. Nobody knew. Basically everybody was either panicked or near panicked. And Charles brought his generals into the room and he goes, okay, you guys now have more decision rights and more money to spend. Go spend it. We are not stopping. We're going to accelerate. And I was like, bro, I've read about this in business books, but nobody actually ever does this, right? When it's a pullback, everybody's like, we're going to panic. We got to protect ourselves. And he's like, no, we're putting it on the line. And I'm like, for an 80-some-year-old guy who could be sitting on a beach somewhere to do this, that is like a 500-year vision. Like, who is this man? And so to say he's a legend is beyond that, in my opinion. I've seen people fly from all over the world to spend time with Charles, and for good reason. I mean, what I sometimes forget is we are literally living in the same city with somebody that is transformative of the world, right? Nobody's ever seen an entrepreneur build privately what he's built. And so that was one instance. And the second instance is this last year, we had a chance to bring all of our portfolio companies together for the first time. And Charles volunteered to come speak at it, but he's like, I don't want to speak. I want you to interview me. So we did this, except that was on the other side. Man, that was a nervous interview. I'm not going to lie. But I got to sit across and spend 3 or 4 days with him just prepping. And I don't know very many people that are more down to earth and truly care about people. Like, the reason he's still in business today is because he's trying to figure out how to give away hundreds of millions, billions of dollars back into the ecosystem to improve people's lives. That's his goal, right? Because if not, he would be retired, hanging out, right? Enjoying the jet life, whatever you do when you do that kind of thing. But instead, he literally, every single day that I spent with him, all the questions I asked him always led back to, okay, what value are we creating for people in society? And that's when you hear things about Charles at times by the media that just simply aren't true, because when you spend time with him and you see his heart for trying to give back to the ecosystem, to give back to society, to give back to this country, he wants everyone in this room to be able to control their own lives. He wants you to have the freedom that you need to have to make the best choices for you and your children and your grandchildren. And anything that comes up against that, he's willing to stand up and say, no, that's not appropriate. You're going to hurt people. Even at times, he's fought against legislation that would cost Coke billions of dollars. He's said that we should have this legislation, even though it would cost us money, because it was best for society. And so he's fought for things that when you see somebody willing to cut off their own right arm to help somebody else, you just changed, right? And that, I came up to Coke not knowing that. But now that I've actually been here, it's been one of the best life lessons. Even though I can't consider Charles my mentor, he has mentored many of us because of how he's continued to build up leaders around him. And I'm one that gets the benefit from that.
Last question right here.
Yeah, Jason, I was curious, how do you find investments before other VCs or companies find them? Like, how do you get to them before, if it's a good idea, like, how are you able to find them and get to them before anyone else does?
Yeah. So the question is, how do we get to good investments before other people do? The short answer is I don't always get there first, unfortunately. But the longer answer is you really need to go proactively, preemptively hunt for great companies. So I'm not even looking for companies that are raising money. I'm looking for great companies. And so that starts by understanding the space that I'm in and spending time with entrepreneurs. And when I find a great entrepreneur, I often ask him, well, who else in your space do you think is doing something creative? I'm not asking him who's raising money. I'm asking who's doing something creative. And then I try to go give back to that ecosystem, meaning as I get to know entrepreneurs, what do you need? You need an intro? You need to know somebody. I try to connect them. And then over time, they realize, well, Jason cares, because I do, because I may still never get a chance to invest in that company. There was one company that we missed an investment in early on that's up almost 40 times our money, right? Kind of painful to say that, right? I'll cry and get in the fetal position later. But this is an entrepreneur that every time I see his company's gone up, he's raised more money, I send him an email, I give him a call and say, hey, super excited for you. This is awesome. We lost out on this one. This was us. But hey, tell me if there's anything you need. And he's always like, bro, you don't need to reach out. I'm like, I know, but I care about you, right? I'm excited that you're doing well. And so I try to get to those companies and entrepreneurs as fast as I can and as early as I can, just to really understand what they're building. And right now it's harder than it's ever been because there's more money in the ecosystem than ever. And certain places, especially when your company really starts growing, places like Tiger and Coatue and other big VCs, they're writing term sheets in like 48 hours. So, they spent a day and a half with you and now they're giving you $100 million check and saying, we want to invest. And I'm not very often going to be in front of that unless I've already built a relationship with the entrepreneur, because I'm not transactional. I'm not just trying to give him money and say, go do your thing. I want to understand your business and really help. And so we have to just be better at building relationships, and we have to honestly care, which goes back to Charles's point. If you honestly care and you have a 500-year model versus a 7-year model, hopefully that will change the way that you do business.
Well, Jason, on behalf of Wichita Startup Week and everybody here, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate you both sharing some insight today. So that wraps up day 2. So we are 40% of the way through. How is everyone feeling? Yeah. I'm not the hype man. Tomorrow morning, we are starting out with 1 million cups. So 8:45 is networking. 9 o'clock, the pitches start. 10 o'clock, we will go into my session, minimally viable product formulations. So this is a workshop. So don't come and sit on your phone and expect to just watch me look magnificent on stage. This is a working session. So prepare to bring an idea, prepare to beat up that idea, and prepare to leave with a better idea. We will have sessions at 1, 2, and 4 in the afternoon, and also 4 o'clock tomorrow is the next stage finalists presentation. That link to that live stream is in our calendar. But if you would switch the slide one more. I want to make sure that you look at our sessions for the next 3 days. So the QR code goes to wichitastartupweek.com. We have 3 more packed days of sessions. Bring a friend, push someone, tweet about it, Facebook about it. We're looking forward to finishing out the week strong and appreciate your time today making that possible. So thank you. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.